Hello, 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 people. I don't know why this internet it's just genuinely horrible in this place. So, anyways, I'm only here for another 10 days now, and then I'm off to Turkey, which I'm pretty bloody excited about. Not what we're talking about today, though. Talking about children should be allowed to make their own choices and decisions, even if they're not always right. Let's jump over and have a look at what some of the parents are saying about this. And if you've got your opinions, drop them in the comments below and I'll get to them very, very shortly. All right. So we've got the first comment. Yes, but within reason, I wouldn't let my 13-year-old smoke just because the other kids at school are. But if they want to eat a Vegemite Nutella sandwich, that's up to them. I don't like bread. Presumably, this would be white bread. White bread is the equivalent to a bucket of ice cream with some flour in it. So I wouldn't encourage my kids to eat that. Actually, I wouldn't even let them because it wouldn't be in the house. Vegemite Nutella, I wouldn't have in the house because it's just like sugar central. And I'm looking at this from a slightly different standpoint, a little bit critical. Not the point that she was getting across. Obviously, she's looking at smoking has been a really bad thing. Eating a certain type of sandwich, not as much. Can agree with the sentiment, but look, there'd be a reason they want to smoke. Usually, they'd be looking at the idea of it and being like, okay, cool, I want to smoke because this person does, or I want to be like this, or da da da. So there's this really cool story that Tony Robbins shares about what happened to him as a child, and this is what his mum did. My mum used to do things similar, but it was when we swore. It wasn't super effective because she couldn't follow through with it, but his mum could. So let's have a look at this story, which I wrote out, and see what you think. I heard of an interesting story where a 7-year-old boy, I think he was 6 actually, wanted to drink beer, alcohol, to be like dad, right? That's the important thing. So I want to have a smoke because I want to be like dad, or I want to be like this cool person, or it's usually where it comes from. Ask the right questions, you'll get the answer there. His mum said, okay, but if you want to drink beer to be like dad, you have to drink 6 as well. Little boy said yes and started to drink his first beer. He wasn't doing so well after half a beer and he said he wanted to stop. His mum said, no, 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 no. You said you wanted to be like dad. You have to drink all 6. By the end of the first one, he vomited and she made him continue with the beers after. He continued vomiting. Now, I don't think he actually got through all 6, but I think he got somewhere to about 3. By the end of the third, by the time he was on his third, it was just even the smell was triggering vomiting, right? And if you've ever had like a big night out on, you go have some tequila shots. Tequila is a really common one, or certain vodka shots or something like that. And then even just the smell repulses you and you just can no longer do it anymore. Right? You imagine being a little kid and having that happen, but your association to that is beer and alcohol. Because you're young, you just group them all together. You don't understand that there's all these different ones. That's a very, very, very powerful thought to be embedded in you at a very, very young age. The result of that was incredibly effective, that he's never drank. Like, he never drank again. I still believe to this day he doesn't. He used that exact same technique in his psychological practice to get people to stop smoking. So what he'd do is people that wanted to come in and quit smoking, he puts on this sort of macho, like, mafia boss attitude, right, to go and talk to them. And he makes them really scared and he's forcing them to smoke. So what he's doing is he's attaching fear to smoking and creating that connection in the brain. And then he keeps doing it until that becomes the dominant thing, so that when people go to smoke, they're actually scared. Right? They're scared. And I've done similar things with people that I've worked with in relation to overeating or whatever it is, because there's usually a thought pattern that leads them to this behavior. If you can take that thought pattern, it's like playing remember when we all had CDs, right, and discs. When you get this thought pattern and you just play it over and over again, it's going to play the song that's there. But if you can scratch the CD, then there's like a jump in the song and it doesn't play so well. And then you scratch it more, scratch it more, scratch it more. So that's like what was that's what he basically does with the smoking things. What I've done with people. So it's quite a simple process to do. This is the essence of it. Rather than attaching, so they've got the habit, which isn't good, and they attach it to something that fills a needs. This is a completely different conversation now. But if you've got a child that wants to sort of experience or do something like drinking, even drugs, or I would prefer, so my kids to try drugs and do that if they're curious about it. To do it, I would want them to do it in my presence, and I'd want it to be done in a way where they would build a really, really negative connotation to it. So if it was like a dangerous, so if it's like, I don't know, what would let's say weed, for example, right? And then they get really tired. Then what I would probably have organized beforehand is that they smoke the weed and then they don't have the energy and anything that they usually would. And then what I'd do is I'd get someone to break into the house and I'd get someone to beat me up or break a lot of shit in the house and steal something that's really, really important to them. And they never get it back. And there'd be like a comment where if you were sober, you could have prevented this. And I'd want that to be the thought that really, really sticks, because then it's like, okay, cool. Never going to do that again, because I never, ever want to be like that. And that's something that I worked out myself. I would have liked it to be worked out earlier, but I never want to get to this massive, massive wasted, drunk state, because then everything I know when it comes to sort of fighting stuff, it doesn't work. And I've been in situations, this was in China, where I was I was like 21 at the time, 22, going out and drank a lot. And I struggling to walk, right? And I get pretty mouthy especially at that point, I was very mouthy. I was very much a smart ass. And I'd say these things to like bouncers at clubs or security guards or whatever, and I was just so rude, so rude. I deserved to have my head kicked in. I'd also lived in China for too long at that point. I should have moved. Anyway, got a little bit too smart. I started to get jumped by all these Chinese people, and they're like ants especially towards foreigners, right? If you're a foreigner and you go over and you piss one off, boom, they all appear and they're around you. None of them are really that strong and none of them really know how to fight. And I'm very, very accomplished. And so they were just sort of pushing me around, a couple of throwing hits and kicks, and none of it really hurt. And I knew it. I was just so angry with myself that I could do nothing about it, because I'd made decisions to destroy my basically consciousness and ability to function, so that all those skills and the knowledge I had to actually prevent this thing from happening, couldn't use. And there are occasions where I've gone over that, but it is very, very rare. Very, very rare, because I don't mind having a couple of beers and, feeling a little bit chilled, and, that's all good every now and then. It's definitely not something I do all the time. I much prefer not drinking, but if you go out with some mates and have a few beers, that can be fun, and no dramas against it. But the principle I'm trying to get is around that sort of angle where if they want to try these things and you can attach it, if you know it's a negative behavior and you know it's going to be destructive long term, and you can attach it to something neurologically, you attach it neurologically through how you construct it to something bad, they will not go back to that behavior. Just like in the Tony Robbins example, where he didn't go back to drinking ever because his mum did it at such a young age, and she allowed him to make his own decision, but created the environment to get a really positive result. No, I think that's great. I've got absolutely no problems with that. I would do a similar thing if my kids wanted to try McDonald's. I would make them eat it until they vomited and vomited and vomited and vomited and vomited, and just got so sick that they never wanted to touch that food, that even the look of the McDonald's sign would make them want to vomit. Like, that's how much I hate that food, and I know it's so bad for you. So that would be something that I would be willing to do if they wanted to do that. But I'd let them make that decision. give a bit of a nudge around how I create the outcome around it, right? Agrees with it, let them make their own choices. And she gets a lot of negative comments. Let's have a look at what some of those are. Deal with the consequences. That's the exact thing. Letting them deal with the consequences. Problem is when they make a bad decision, they can sort of edge their way really slowly into it. And that's why with the drugs thing, I try and make it really, really big, really, really early, because especially if they've got a really curious nature, like myself, they can just do one and be like, oh yeah, that was all right. Let's try something else. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. And if you know it's not going to be good long term, if they don't have an addictive personality, it's probably not a bad thing. If they've got addictive personalities, lack of discipline, and very low self-control, then letting them experiment with those things is much worse. Ideally, again, they do it in your presence so you know it's safe, or you can construct things to create, I guess you're manufacturing a thought process that you want, that you know it's going to be beneficial long term. But yeah, letting them deal with the consequences. Sometimes you can help manufacture those consequences, and you want to be there to help them at the end of it and discuss it and go about it. So I'm a fan, majority of the time, of letting anyone in general make their own decisions. Now, I mean, even when it comes to food, and I think my sister's a great example of this because she's incredibly intolerant to gluten, for example. A lot of gut issues are related from certain injuries that she got as a child and didn't realize till later on. And the way it affects her gut and health, and the way it's also affected her kids, has been pretty massive. So gluten is really, really bad, but there's a lot of other foods that they have to be quite careful with because of the reactions in some of those things. And if you're not aware of that, by all means, just go and do a search. Probably not on Google, but if you go to Brave as the internet browser that I use, it tends to be not censored, and you'll be able to find some of that. Children's Health Defense is great. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that dives into a lot of that stuff. He looks more at the sort of mercury poisoning and those sorts of things, but even things like peanut allergies, that's been linked to one of the ones that uses, I don't remember which one it is now, but anyways, yeah, all these sorts of things, you can reverse them, you can fix them. It's just a lot of work on sort of healing their gut if you want them to be able to have that sort of freedom. Not, again, what I'm talking about now, but yeah, when it comes to eating that sort of food, so she's got her kids that she knows react really bad to this, but the reaction isn't always instant. So if they want to eat chocolate, or they want to eat bread, or they want to do this, and then they start getting headaches and they start getting stomach aches, then every time that happens, she reinforces to them so strongly the connection. She's a pretty strong woman, between the food and the choice that they chose, the choice that they made to eat that food, and the food that they made, and also reinforcing that they know that that's bad. I would go a step further, and I would actually force them to eat an enormous amount, and I would let them get so sick, because again, it's more of a rapid approach. I'm on the extreme end. This is just me because I just like getting things done fast. For me, it's a time saver. Longer term, it's going to be bad. You're going to have a bit of short-term pain, but long term, you're never going to have to worry about them being like, oh, can I have some white bread? Or can I have some dairy? Or can I have, and you just know you're going to have to keep dealing with the same shit. So I'm just like, okay, cool. This is going to be a really crap week, but let's do it. Boom. You smash it out, get the job done. They're not going to worry about it because they're going to have this. So you're using fear in a really intelligent, constructive way to get positive results for your kids. So letting them make those choices, but guiding how the consequences are going to come about, I think is fine. I'm a fan of it. Probably not. You don't want to do it to a point where their life's in danger or anything like that. So you need to be cautious and prepare the environment as best you can. And if there is a chance of their life being in danger, then you want to have the appropriate medical stuff very, very close. Like, people allergic to peanuts, they eat a peanut, they can nearly die very, very quickly. That's why they are so petrified to touch peanuts, and they just won't. And they'll ask for every piece of food, is there peanuts in this? Is there peanuts in this? There was a kid at my school that was the same. The reason the reaction was like that is because it's massive fear when he eats it. He knows he's about to die and feel his throat swelling up. So it's self-managing. And if you can create that around things that you know are going to be negative for the kids and shortcut it, and maybe it only takes a week of their life rather than taking them 20 or 30 years to figure it out with the slow, steady degradation or negative effects, I think it's smart. So that's just me though. But yeah, so I agree with it on the whole. You need to be very cautious and aware of the consequences of that action and making sure that you're paying attention to it and hopefully even constructing it for their long-term benefit. Right? We'll leave it there. Catch ya.